you haven't sold your story yet to a publisher, you've probably envisioned it a million times, right? Hollywood creates this image of being a writer, and it sounds amazing, right? You just sit around all day thinking of stories you want to create. You go sit in coffee shops and type away your afternoon. You go for long walks, or you talk to your lovely agent or editor who only cares about you and is your best friend, right? So I've seen it in Hollywood movies all the time, and it always earns a little chuckle because that's really not the life of an author. And so what I want to share with you today is, what is it really like? What is the life of an author after you get the book deal?
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Amante channel. If you're just meeting me, I am Julia Amante. I am a romance author and women's fiction author, and I've been writing for over 25 years, probably close to 28, 29 years now, from the time I first started to take it seriously. And I decided to create this channel to share my tips. And today, one of the things I want to share with you is what it was like, at least for me, and what it's typically like for authors when they first sell their book. And of course, I'm talking about publishing with a traditional publisher. If you're self-publishing, it's completely different. But if you are dreaming of one day selling your book to a publisher, let's talk about what it's like. First, let's talk about what we call the call. So you send the manuscript off to a publisher, and a publisher reads it, or an editor reads it. They like it. Sometimes they ask for more, but they finally decide that, yes, this is perfect for their publishing house, and they want to publish it. They will call you. And the reason they're calling you is they want to make an offer. They want to tell you how much they are willing to pay for this, and if you're interested, then they'll talk about when they expect you to deliver the full manuscript. They'll talk about whether it's a 1-book or 2-book or 3-book deal. Usually, if you're a brand new author, it'd probably only be a 1-book deal. The advance, which is the money they're going to pay you, is probably going to be a lot less than you are expecting, but you won't care because you're very excited about selling your book. So any advance is going to be okay with you, probably. And it's very exciting because you've worked hard, and now a publisher wants to buy it and they want to publish the book. For me, my first editor called me on a partial. I'd sent a partial in, so I sent 3 chapters and a synopsis. She was excited about that. She asked me if I could write the whole thing. I said yes. I was offered actually a contract on before I even wrote the whole thing. So then she gave me a date of when the final manuscript would be due, and I turned it in. It was published. It was great. Later on, after that book came out, or after I'd submitted it, I wrote I had another idea. I sent it off to her, and this time I ended up getting a 3-book contract. So the first one was for that 1 book. The next time I was offered a 3-book contract, which was so exciting because that meant that they would buy my next 3 books. So the next thing that I want to discuss is the actual writing and the business. So if you're a brand new author and you've been contracted to write your story or to edit it or whatever, so if they buy a full manuscript, they will still expect you to edit it. So they're not going to just buy and publish it. They're going to buy it. They're going to say, okay, these are the changes we want you to make, and then you have so much time to make those changes. Or if they buy it on a partial, they're going to give you a few months to write it. So the next few months are going to be busy with you writing and also learning about the business if you haven't already learned. So when I first published, that first book was called Conquest. It was written under my Laura Rios pseudonym. I sold it to Kensington Publishing for their brand new at the time Encanto line, which were a series, a line of romance books featuring Latino characters. So it was very exciting. It was new. It was the early 2000s. Actually, it was I sold it at late 1998, so the book was going to be released in 2000. So many, many, many years ago. But it was an exciting new concept at the time. There were no publishers that were publishing Latino romance lines, or really any Latino line at all. There was a random book here or there that was published, but nothing like this where it was commercial fiction featuring Latino characters from all parts of the United States. So this included various cultures, right? So we had East Coast Latinas writing Latino characters that were Cuban, maybe Puerto Rican. There were, just all kinds. So all the different various cultures, Latino cultures that are typical of the United States, that's who the authors were representing. And so I was very excited to be part of this new venture that Kensington was trying. Now, but during this time, not only was I writing the book, but in the early 2000s, the internet was still fairly new. We didn't have all the social media we have today, but we had, reader groups, the Yahoo groups, and all these different groups where you could actually talk to people, which was very different than I think authors that came before me. I actually got to know all the other authors that were part of that Latino line, right? Of that, so there were like 22 of us. Most of us, not everybody, but most of us were in this group together. We could chat, we could talk about the line and the business and the marketing, what each person was doing. We talked about how to edit. So some of the authors that were there were a little bit more familiar with publishing, and they gave us advice. Those new people, the newbies like me, on well, how are you supposed to edit? Well, how are you supposed to respond to edits from an editor? What would it be like to promote the book, and what kind of promotion ideas did people have? So it was really nice because I got to chat with other authors and get to know other authors from the line, which again, prior to the internet, authors were just really on their own. They didn't have anybody to talk to. They had to figure everything out by themselves. But what I realized from being part of this group was that, wow, I not only have to write the book, but I have to market this book. I have to promote this book. I have to probably set up book signings. So these are some things that I was doing at the time. So I was planning a book tour. I was attending book events that the publisher sent me to. So sent me to the Latino Book and Family Festival in Los Angeles. I went to that. I went to conferences all over the place. So I went to conferences in Miami. I went to conferences in Houston, New York, Phoenix, Maui. I went all over the place because my goal was to learn as much as I could about the publishing business, meet other publicists, editors, writers, talk to people. I had to create my own website because I didn't have one yet. So I had to hire somebody because at that time I could not create my own website. I had to pay to hire somebody to do that for me. I purchased ads in magazines. I looked for reviewers. I had a contest. So this was a shipboard romance. It was a little tiny romance. I should show it to you. I will put it up here on the video, but it was a little tiny romance. I think it cost $3.99 when the book came out. And I probably made a quarter every time this book sold, maybe even less. And I spent so much money on this book, promoting the book, having a contest where a couple won a trip to Mexico. And I first tried to get a cruise donated from a cruise company, and it didn't work out. So I just bought it. I paid for it. I took publicity photos because, of course, I had to look like an author. So it was insane. And the amount of work that it was, I lived for this book. So one of the things that happens after you get this call, after you sell your first book, is you have to really, if you haven't done this ahead of time, you have to quickly learn all about the book business. How do books sell? Who are the distributors? How are they getting to the bookstores? I remember at one point I wanted to get my book into Costco, and so I talked to a publicist, the Kensington publicist, and she's like, "There's no way," because what Costco does is they buy massive amount of books, and they buy them usually from established authors or celebrities, and there's no way you're going to get your book into Costco because it's just not going to happen. They're not going to take a brand new author who has never published anything and sell their books. So you really should start now learning about what to, all of these things, having a website and doing all that. But if you haven't, then you have to figure this all out very quickly as soon as you sell your book. So that whole marketing publicity part of being an author, I learned. I had to learn immediately. But then I found out, well, I didn't find out. I mean, I just realized that, well, now I have another contract. I have to write 3 more books, right? So the next thing I have to do is, while I'm marketing and publicizing and going to book events and going to book signings and conferences and speaking and doing all the stuff and trying to have a family, because at that time I had babies. So taking care of my kids and also having my day job as a teacher, because I wasn't making any money off the books. I still had to work. So I was probably sleeping maybe 4 hours a night because I was so busy. This book became my entire life. Writing became everything I did when I wasn't working as a teacher or taking care of my kids. And so the next thing I knew is I had to write more books and I had to find time to write more books. So this is why I didn't sleep, because I put my babies to bed maybe 10 o'clock at night by the time they were finally out. And I wrote until like 2 in the morning. And then I got up about 5 or 6 in the morning to get ready to go to work. So it was a very, very stressful time and a very exciting time at the same time. And the other thing that happened, and one of the realities of working with publishers, is that agents and editors move around a lot. They don't stay at the same publishing house for very long. Some of them do. Some of them get promoted within a publishing house, and they'll start as a basic editor and move on to become a senior and associate editor, all of this. And so some of them do stay, but a lot of them don't. They leave. And the same thing with agents. So I've had like 3 or 4 agents in my career, because they move, they quit, they drop you, they do all kinds of things. So you probably will not be with the same agent at the end of your career that you were at the beginning of your career. And the same with editors. They leave, they get fired. So with Kensington, as I was on my way to Houston on a book tour going to a conference, I got a call that my editor had been let go. And so what did that mean? Well, she was no longer going to be with Kensington, which means nobody was running the Encanto line. They had to put somebody else in there, and probably within a year, the whole line folded. They just couldn't make it work. And so what that meant was that I became an orphan author. I had no editor, and I could have stayed with Kensington, and they did say, well, yeah, go ahead and submit the next book. But since the books that I had written for Encanto, there was no Encanto anymore, those books basically died. There was no home for them anywhere else in the publishing house. I could think of a different story that wasn't Latino and turn it in, but there was no guarantee that was going to be published. And so I ended up really with no publisher. And it took me 3 years to find a new publisher. So one of the things that happens is authors think that once they get published, they're done. They're all set. They're going to be with the same publisher forever. It's going to be wonderful. And that doesn't usually happen. It doesn't happen very often. A lot of times a writer will end up moving from one house to another, finding a new publisher. These days, sometimes they get tired of that and they will self-publish, because it's so difficult to find a publisher for a book. So it doesn't mean that if you sell your first book that you're always going to be with the same publisher, or that it's going to lead to immediate success. It's always work, and it's something you want to continue to strive. You want to continue to get better. You want to continue to look for a better book deal, a better publisher, or think of independently publishing. So I mentioned that it's not the way Hollywood makes it out to be, being a writer, but it still is very magical, even though I'm making it sound like maybe it's not, right? But what makes it magical isn't that you're going to make a lot of money, that you're going to be hugely successful, or that you're going to have this dream life of, writing in cafes and barely having to work and just sitting around being creative. As I mentioned, I spent more money promoting my books than I made with my books, probably for all of them. I mentioned how difficult it was. I didn't become famous. I didn't become rich. I did get to work with 3 major New York publishers, and that was pretty cool, but it was always a struggle, and eventually I ended up not working with any of them. So if you are a writer, you probably know where the magic is. It isn't in all that other stuff. It's in actually writing your stories and loving the stories that you're writing. That's why we write. That's what brings us to the page every day. It isn't all those other things that the outside world thinks is really wonderful and cool and romantic about being a writer. The best part about being a writer is the actual writing of the story and creating your own characters and your own storylines, your own plots. So the magic is in doing the work, actually being a writer and enjoying it and loving it. Because believe me, to the outside world, you're just like everybody else, right? You are. I remember going to my children's games, going to their swim meets or their swim practices or their soccer practices. I mean, football practices, and sitting there, right, being pretty antisocial, editing my manuscripts and ignoring everyone else that was there. So all the other parents probably thought, who's this strange woman who never talks to anyone and doesn't even know how to dress well, right? So I'm always frumpy looking, just running from my desk to my kids' activities, struggling to buy groceries, rarely buying any new clothes. So just like everybody else until I get to sit at my desk. Because once I get to sit at my desk, a whole world opens up. I get to create magic. I get to create characters that somebody will one day read, a story that someone will one day read that I don't even know. Somebody will open up the book and they'll experience a story, they'll experience emotions, they will enjoy it, they'll cry, whatever. And why? Because I spent the time sitting at my desk creating this for them. So will you ever have the Hollywood dream? Maybe you might be able to sit in coffee shops and write. You might be able to make some money. You might have an agent who is your best friend. But that's not what being an author is about. It's always, always, always about the story. The rest of it is this surreal journey that doesn't really matter and doesn't change your life at all. But what will change your life are those characters and those stories that you create. And to me, that's magical. So I hope you've enjoyed just my story and the way it happened with me. Every author has their own story, but I just wanted you to know what happens after you sign that first contract and you get that first book deal. It isn't always what you expect, but in many ways, it's a lot better. Thank you for being here. I hope you come back next week and I can share a new story or some more tips that'll help you to write your book.